Mike with GRETA'S Guns, and today we're going to talk a little bit about shotguns. So we'll start with the tactical or home defense side a little bit. This here is a Benelli M4. This is kind of the top tier, cream of the crop setup. Everybody kind of wants these. Nice thing with these is they're semi-automatic. So once you load the tube, you chamber around and you can pull the trigger until the gun's empty. This gun has a gas system, kind of like a rifle. So as a semi-automatic, these are a bit more reliable than a traditional inertia-fed semi-automatic. So we've got the Benelli M2. This is a bit lighter. There's no gas system in it. This is an inertia shotgun. So it uses the pressure of the shell to cycle the action, as opposed to the M4, where it actually has a gas system, and the gas is going to come up through the system and blow the action back. 1301, or the Beretta 1301, is also an inertia-fed shotgun. It's a bit lighter of a setup, and these things are super reliable. Okay, now we'll kind of talk a little bit about pumps. So we have your traditional Remington 870 here, tried and true shotgun. There's millions of these out in the world. The nice thing with a pump, as opposed to a semi-automatic, although a lot of the higher end semi-automatics are very reliable, a pump action is the most reliable. It's manually operated, very difficult to get a jam unless you short stroke the pump. These things pretty much always work, as opposed to a semi-automatic where you may need a certain load, double out buck, something higher pressure to get them to cycle correctly. And then you've got Bullpup style guns, which are becoming very popular, nice and short, like the Kel-Tec KSG. Cool thing with these guns is that these are as short as legally possible. Your average home defense gun or home defense shotgun is going to have an 18 to 20 inch barrel. This one happens to have 2 magazine tubes on it, and each of them holds 7 shells. So what a lot of people will do is they'll load slugs on one side, load buckshot on the other side, and you can select which tube you want, or you can have it feed 1 and 1, 1 and 1. And there's a lot of stuff you could do to these: flashlights, optics, all kinds of fun stuff. This is kind of a home defense gun. Good old side-by-side. Not everyone's really into these, but these are classic guns and they're super fun to have. This one has a dual trigger setup, so one trigger will operate one barrel and the other trigger will operate the other barrel. You do still have a manual safety, which is nice, and this gun has ejectors in it. Alright, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the sporting shotguns. So there's a bunch of different ways you can go about this. There's a bunch of different options. We'll start with a semi-automatic. So just like the tactical home defense style setup, the semi-automatics, you load the tube and you just pull the trigger till it's empty. A lot of guys are going to use these for hunting, although they are a little bit more finicky. You're going to be out in the dirt and the water. It's very easy to gum the gun up, although Benelli's, Berettas, the higher quality stuff tend to run very well, especially once you find the load that they like. Generally, a sporting gun is going to be very lightweight. You're going to see porting in some of the barrels. You're going to see some carbon fiber sometimes. It just depends on the version you get into. Now, side-by-sides and over-unders are also great sporting guns if you're going to go shoot skeet, shoot clays, anything like that. But some people do use them for hunting as well. You are restricted in capacity to 2+1 when you're hunting. So with an over-under, you typically only have one trigger. Some of the older style over-unders will have 2 triggers and will actuate each barrel individually. But this is an inertia style system. So once you fire the first round, the inertia from the recoil will reset the trigger and allow it to fire the second barrel. So these are great options as well. You typically will have adjustable chokes in a lot of the sporting guns, so you can, depending on the load you're shooting, if you're shooting dove or you're shooting duck, if you got to reach out, you could change to a full choke, you can run modified, there's a lot of options. Then you've got, again, traditional pump style shotgun. This is going to be, again, your most reliable setup. Whether you're shooting sporting clays or hunting, this is a great option to go with. Super reliable. You probably can't fire quite as quickly as the over-under or the semi-automatic, but you get an extra round in this over the over-under, and where you may get a malfunction in a semi-automatic, a pump will generally not fail you. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the different controls. So, the Remington 870, which again is a classic, has a pump release in front of the trigger guard. So, in order to chamber the first round, You pull the pump release, it'll allow you to pull the pump back and chamber the first round. After that, you pull the trigger, and you can just continue to pump it every time you pull the trigger. Safety is also a cross bolt like a traditional rifle. A traditional Mossberg style shotgun is going to have the pump release behind the trigger guard, so you can kind of reach this very easily with your middle finger. You can then pump it, then you can pull the trigger. Works just like every other pump. Typically in a Mossberg, this one happens to be a Maverick, it's going to have an ambidextrous safety on the top of the tang, which is really nice, as opposed to the traditional crossbow. Then we'll move on to the KSG, which is definitely an interesting one. You have your pump release here at the end of the trigger guard. You pull it down, you can pump it back, chamber the first round. Again, just like everything else, once you pull the trigger, you can continue pumping it until you run out of ammo. So with practice, you can get pretty fast at that. Now, going to a semi-automatic style, you're basically going to pull this back, and you know, if you're an experienced shooter, you can empty this whole gun before the first shell hits the ground. So you can shoot these very fast. With the tactical style shotguns, you're typically going to have a DLC or a nitride or a phosphate type of finish, you know, something very hard. Where in the sporting stuff, you could get anything from a phosphate like that all the way to very nice bluing, stainless. You know, you can get nickel and engraving. There's a lot of options if you want something a little bit nicer for your hunting rig or your sporting rig. Thanks for watching. All the information is down below. If you have any questions, just go ahead and shoot us a message.